Joining me now, Kenesha Grant, historian and political science professor at Howard University, and Danielle Moodie-Mills, host of the podcast WokeAF and Democracy-ish. Welcome to you both. Ladies, Danielle, I'm going to start with you here. What's your reaction to this and to the arguments that you've heard both for and against Mike Bloomberg?
I mean, I think that Mike Bloomberg has a lot of explaining to do. Look, I think that it is really interesting timing to come out and say that you're against stop and frisk, or you had no idea that it was going to hurt Black and Latinx communities in the way that it did. Mike Bloomberg is a very smart man. So the idea that we're supposed to believe that he didn't know the ramifications of stopping and frisking Black and Latino men in New York City was going to be a problem, or that the traumatic effects of doing that was going to be a problem is suspicious. That he comes out a few months before he decides to run for president and then admit to this. The reality is that he's caused a lot of damage within the Black community and the Latinx community in New York City, and he should talk about that, and he should talk about more about the policies that he wants to bring to the nation, to people of color that have been marginalized, and talk about, honestly, about the policies that he celebrated and uplifted here in New York City.
So then, Danielle, what do you think about someone like New York Congressman Gregory Meeks, who said, and we know that he has endorsed Mike Bloomberg, but he said, look, there's more to this redlining. It's not so easy to just look at it like this, and it's part of the reason why he's endorsed him.
But that to me is the problem, is that like it actually really is easy. Redlining is something that was done in order to keep communities of color down, in order to gentrify certain areas of New York City. You're giving tax abatements to one group while you're pushing another group out. Like Mike Bloomberg did that in New York, and so he needs to admit to that and say, yeah, it was a bad idea, but this is why I did it, and this is what I'm going to do now. But for us to believe that it wasn't problematic and just to forget about it, it's not going to happen.
So, Kenesha, here's how Bloomberg responded this week, particularly to his comments and language on stop and frisk. Here's that.
I defended it, looking back, for too long, because I didn't understand then the unintended pain it was causing to young Black and brown families and their kids. I should have acted sooner and faster to stop it. I didn't, and for that I apologized. Now, I know I can't change history, but what I can do is learn from my mistakes.
Do you get the impression that he thinks it's enough to say the words, I apologize? Do you think it is being taken as sincere?
I do think he believes that it's enough to say that he's sorry. I don't think it's being taken as sincere. I think the folks I've talked to, the folks I know, are tired of sorry. They're tired of casting their votes for people who are the lesser of two evils, and everybody wants to be able to have a president that they can be proud of. And I think that he's setting himself up for a position where he's not going to be that person. It's not enough in this instance to say, stop and frisk was bad, I didn't recognize what I was doing, when you had lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit and complaint after complaint telling you exactly that people were feeling like they were caged in their communities, that they were experiencing trauma. I think if he wants to do this right, he has to say, listen, I recognize that there were very racist undertones driving the way that I use this policy. I recognize that there are racist undertones driving the way that I think about the bank failures of 2008 and the way that I think about redlining, and I'm sorry. I'm going to make it the case that I have people around me who check me when I slip into those things if that happens again. But I don't think it's enough to say just I'm sorry.
Something that's quite interesting, Kenesha, is the Wall Street Journal, which is pointing out that Bloomberg has a complicated history of former President Obama, even though he's running a boatload of ads. I mean, there's one in particular that I've seen multiple times featuring his relationship with Obama. Bloomberg did not endorse Obama in 2008, and then he waited until just days before the 2012 election before endorsing him. So the current Bloomberg ads on this topic, do you see them as disingenuous?
I think they are. I think they're disingenuous. I was actually in Florida last weekend when I first saw the ads and was kind of struck by them. Like, did Barack Obama give his permission to have his image and likeness and voice in these ads? And I think for some people, they don't recognize the space between using these old media clips and having Obama's support. And so I think that these kind of ads are problematic. I think that it's especially problematic given the complicated history between these two that you just talked about.
What's interesting in this Quinnipiac poll, Danielle, it shows, and by the way, it was taken before the New Hampshire primary, it shows that Bloomberg is leading Democrats in a head-to-head matchup with the president. And a number of African-American surrogates have certainly since defended him in spite of his language, in spite of his comments. Are African-American voters in general willing to look past Bloomberg's record in the greater interest of removing Trump from the White House?
Yeah, I think that, look, black voters are not a monolith, but they are very pragmatic. We are pragmatic folks because we understand what happens when you have a Donald Trump in the White House. We know what it's going to do to our communities. We know what it's going to do to our schools. We know what it's going to do to healthcare. And we see the danger and the threat that is Donald Trump. So looking at the field, you're thinking to yourself, who has the money? Who has the resources that will be able to stop him? And right now, Bloomberg has spent over $300 million on ads across the country. He can spend $2 billion on this election, and you know what? He'll still be worth $59 billion. Right? So when you think about how you can go toe-to-toe and spin the media in the way that you need to, Bloomberg has the resources to do that, and I think that that's what folks are looking at.
Yeah, 100% there. So, Kanisha, at the end of the day, do you think it's going to come down to a comparison of Bloomberg's record with that of President Trump when the African-American community is considered there? And are these records even comparable?
So I think that it's going to be necessary to compare them. I think that Bloomberg is making it the case that he is the person who can defeat Trump. That's the language we've been hearing from many of these campaigns. And I think that black voters will be worried about who can defeat Trump. But I think Bloomberg has a problem before we get to Trump, and it's that the Democratic rivals in the field will be calling him to the carpet about these things that happened in the past and might end up drawing some comparisons between Bloomberg as a billionaire who has access to lots of information but chooses not to use it in some instances, being the same as Donald Trump, who says he's a billionaire and chooses not to use information in some instances. And so I think Bloomberg has a hard way to go with his rivals before he gets to Trump. But in the comparison between the two, I think Danielle is right. It'll be the case that black people make the pragmatic choice.
Okay, Kanisha Grant and Danielle Moodie-Mills. Thank you, ladies, so much for weighing in. Appreciate it.